I am an actuary.
I am an actuary.
I am an actuary.
Welcome to the We Are Actuaries podcast, where you'll meet leaders who use their actuarial powers to solve a range of problems and make a real difference. I am your host, Julia Lessing, and I'm a qualified actuary based in Australia. I help actuaries develop communication and leadership skills to build great actuarial careers. So settle in, learn from the best, and be inspired.
Hi, I'm Martin Mulcair and I'm playing guest interviewer for a brief series of We Are Actuaries that relates to the topic of lifelong learning. I'm keen to explore, in conversation with several actuaries, how they apply the skills and talents that they have developed in non-business areas into the workplace that an actuary enjoys. This should be fun. Hi, I'm Martin Mulcair, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with James McAtamney. Welcome, James.
Thanks, Martin. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, we're really keen to hear about your non-business activities, but let's start with your day job.
Well, day job, I run my own business, McAtamney and Advisors, which I started just over 2 years ago. So we're a commercial advisory business. We structure our work across three areas. One is advisory work, so working with government, private sector, industry, not-for-profits, all shapes and sizes, right across different industries, on things like strategy, policy, economic, financial work, operational matters, and so on. We then have a products area where we're looking to build and put new products out to market. We're soon about to launch the first one of those, which is a subscription-based commercial advisory service specific to small, medium business in Australia, which we think is a really underserved market for that sort of support and accessible, sort of cost-effective support in that area. And then the third part of the business is we call it ventures. So that's where we go and partner with specialists out in the market, individuals and organisations where we think the combination of our capabilities has the ability to provide, some really distinct value for our clients. So that's our core business day to day.
Wow, plenty of variety in your activities in your business world. So take us through some of your musical interests, James.
Well, it's something that's been very close to my heart my whole life, Martin. I play piano. I learnt piano from the age of 4. So grateful to my parents for getting me started in music. And I think, whether it's music or sport or some other activity, I think kids getting involved in extracurricular activities from a young age, I think is really formative. And for me, music absolutely was. So I learnt piano from a young age, right through school, participated in a bunch of different choirs, ensembles, theatre productions, bands. Through high school, joined the big band, the concert band. I think I was part of the liturgical band in high school for a fair few years. And then outside of school, Stedfords and competitions and so on, both as a soloist and then in groups and ensembles and duets and all of that sort of thing. So that was a really formative experience, and music's essentially part of who I am. It's very close to my heart. And through my adult life, I've carried that through mainly in the form of theatre, done a lot of community theatre. I've been on production teams, as a music director, as a creative, also been in the orchestra pit. I've conducted orchestras and sort of led productions in that way, and I chaired a not-for-profit community theatre company in Sydney for a fair few years, as well as being involved as a committee member and a member of the organisation. So it's predominantly been music theatre, how I've carried that through, but certainly music more generally and the arts is an area that's very close to my heart.
Wow. So again, a wonderful variety of aspects of music that you've been involved in. So let's think about some of the skills, talents that you developed through your musical interests that have been applied in your business world. Give me one.
Well, the first one I think that's really clear for me is teamwork and sort of what it means to, particularly in, say, if you're in an orchestra or a band or some other form of music ensemble, a choir maybe, what it means to sort of relate to other musicians. And that's very different to if you're doing a solo performance or something where you're a featured performer. If you're being accompanied, say, and you might be singing a solo performance with an accompaniment, that's very different to if you're playing as a member of an orchestra as a holistic piece. And there's something that I've always found really interesting in that. Obviously, like anything, it becomes clearer, the more, life experience you have and the older you get, and you can look back on it and go, oh, that was a really, interesting lesson. But I think the teamwork element for music really comes down to it's not about being the loudest player necessarily. It's about a whole lot of different skills, listening, blending in with others. Really interesting concept in music, intonation.
Yeah.
Where if you're not playing a fixed tuned instrument like a piano, you might be playing a violin, for example, where you are on the strings. If you're not listening in with the rest of the orchestra, you might be a semitone or a quarter tone out from someone else, and you get dissonance. All of those sorts of things. So the piece around listening to others and dynamics and where you sit relative to that, for me, looking back on it, it was a really formative lesson. I played percussion. It was one of the things that I played in concert band at school. And percussion, most people I think would associate that with, lots of loud banging and, cymbals and crashing and whatever. But, some of the best percussion parts are those that are really soft and quite subtle. In a piece, and that can add drama or add emotion to what's being played elsewhere in the orchestra. So, that for me is probably the main one. And, I put it back into any situation, whether it's business or personal or whatever. There's a piece on how you relate to other people and, working in a team and collaborating and all of those sorts of things. There's certainly some lessons and reflections there that you can sort of draw back upon and go, if I approach this in a different way, or take a bit of a different approach with someone or a team, might get a different result.
Yeah. So teamwork is often quoted as one of those values, one of those must-haves in business. So the specific, maybe an example of what you learned playing in a team in your music world and how that worked in a business environment.
Well, if you take the example of multiple different types of instruments playing together, it's about balance, and sometimes some instruments need to sit back and let the others shine. You might be in a team environment where someone's got huge insights but very shy, or might not feel as confident in expressing those insights, or might feel that they need to hear a bit more from others before they're comfortable framing what they might want to say. And you can have people in a team environment that want to talk more than others and want to have the last word and all of this sort of stuff. And particularly as you go from more of a junior staff member to managing people and then leading teams, there's something in the music piece for me about what you can do in terms of facilitating a dynamic in a team, in terms of inviting other people to make a contribution if they're quiet in a meeting or whatever the case may be. To me, it's that sort of thing. It's a dynamic sort of piece in terms of balancing that out across a group and a room.
Okay.
And, in my experience, and again, this is a common thing I think most people reflect on, is that the leader in the room isn't always the one with all the answers.
Right.
And no one person typically has them. So, if you've got an imbalanced set of contributions in a team or a room, then are you getting to the best result?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But has that been fully tested out, and could someone have a better idea or something to nuance it with or something different to add? And you haven't explored it, then probably yes. And there's probably something more that could be done to try and get a better result.
Okay. Yeah, it's a fascinating dimension of teamwork, the communication, expression aspect. What else have you learned, skills developed in musical world you've applied successfully in business?
Hi, I'm Bill Morella, CEO of Actex Learning, and I'm excited to introduce our latest publication, Aspiring Actuarial Leaders, the Modern Manager's Toolkit by Julia Lessing, a qualified actuary and executive coach with over 20 years of experience. This book is packed with practical strategies, real-world insights, and expert guidance to help you navigate the challenges of modern management. Whether you're a new manager or aiming for executive leadership, this resource will equip you with the skills to thrive. Get your copy today at actexlearning.com and take the next step in your actuarial career.
I think if I reflect on my time, in community theatre, one of the things that I often think back on, and both the productions themselves, but also socially, and meeting people in the audience, and if you're working front of house and talking to people who've come and bought a ticket to the show and whatever, there's something that for me, I just have met so many people that you would never have met in an office, and working with clients. It's just was a totally different cohort, cross section of society. And made some fabulous friends along the way, met a whole lot of different people, had some really interesting experiences where, as a creative team member, for example, seeing someone come in an audition who might have been their first time, or, they may have only just built up the courage to go and put themselves forward for that. Like, there's some fabulous talent out there in the community. Better than some of the professional productions in some ways, because for the professionals, it's a job. They might be passionate about it, but it's a job. And when you're doing it 8 times a week, that can get a little dry. If you're someone, who you've got some great talent, and you go and be part of a production and you put your heart and soul into it for, your week production run. I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but I'm just saying, some of the talent that, comes through in the community is just palpable, and all your family and friends are there, and seeing people shine and come in and do something where it might have been their first time, or they hadn't done it before, or might have felt shy or lacking in confidence about it, and seeing the joy that brought them was hugely rewarding. Equally, there are a lot of situations where, for example, someone might have come and shared something with me, seeking advice, or I had a fair few times where several different people really opened up about some pretty challenging stuff, because they felt safe, or trusted, or wanted someone outside of their daily life who they could just talk to and share what was on their chest. You don't really get that every day in a corporate or an office environment. And I think that that sort of experience gives you some different perspectives that you can, and also some tools and way of talking to people that you can bring back into your work. And again, maybe be a little bit more authentic, get a different result. I think there's a lot of, to put it this way, sort of astroturfing in the business environment because of, the structures and the situations, and that's a spectrum in and of itself. I'm not saying everything is to that extent, but there's some business context that you can get into that are very very controlled, and very lacking in emotion, and lacking in that sort of authenticity. Either by design or because everybody's got their guards up, or it's high stakes, or whatever it might be. And sometimes, having a different sort of conversation with people or a team, or if someone's got something going on outside of work that, they might not be bringing it to work per se, but it affects their presenteeism and how they might be engaging, like all of these sorts of things. For me, having some of those different experiences from my outside of work endeavors gave me some, really interesting perspectives to be able to then draw upon. Not that you necessarily do that every day, but, sometimes just having a different conversation with someone completely can change the dynamic. And I do believe that you really struggle to find that in a typical workplace, particularly the larger corporate type workplaces. I'm not saying that as a blanket statement, obviously. I'm saying in the main.
So lots of examples there of some of the joys and some of the challenges of this broad spectrum of humanity you've been dealing with. The word you threw out, which I'm really keen to explore a bit more, is this concept of authenticity. And in what ways do you think it is that this engagement with different people has helped is it confidence about being authentic for you in the business place, or is it dealing with authentic people that's helped your sense of authenticity in business?
I think for me, and I think I used it before, so I'll mark myself for that as well when I say this comment, is I think it's an overused word in business. I think it's one of these words that people say to sort of, and you feel better about, I've just said I'll be authentic, so that means I'm authentic. I think if I reflect back on, my experiences, I think the concept of sort of having, not having a preconceived idea of where the conversation needs to get to. Okay, you might be solving for an objective or doing something. Of course, there's always that. But I think a lot of times, and this is also partly a function, I think, of how the workplace teaches you to, manage situations and deal with people and whatever. I think a lot of the time you go into a conversation or a situation with, and can have some pretty fixed notions of where it needs to get to either tick a box or smooth something over or whatever it might be. And, when someone's just come to you and asked for advice on, a really, really challenging life situation, or they just want to share what they're thinking, it's like, well, we're not trying to tick a box here. Like, this is a real situation. And, sometimes it's actually just about listening. I think, if someone wants to go there with you, it's not necessarily about having an answer and saying, right, now you've got to go to X, Y, Z and then tick and it'll be fine. Like, I think that kind of being comfortable in sometimes being uncomfortable, and, not necessarily driving a conversation towards a fixed endpoint, probably for me is one of the key parts of where the authenticity piece comes in. And nobody's perfect at that. But like I said before, I think the more that you're in different situations and perhaps have to deal with, the great stuff is easy. When something's going really well or whatever, that's great for everybody. But it's usually the challenging situations where, you get the most out of it. I think as well, the way people give feedback, for example, you come across people outside of work who, a lot of people who just tell you what they think, in very direct terms. You don't get a lot of that in the workplace. There's a lot of sort of feedback sandwiches and, sugarcoating and glossing over. often either the person delivering that feedback or whatever, or the person receiving it completely misses the real point because they're too busy trying to make sure that it's all smooth and whatever. You have a conversation with someone who's not in that structure, and they tell you point blank what they think. It's like, okay, I know where you stand on that issue. Yeah. And again, not that you then go and necessarily deal with everybody like that, but again, I think it's just a different set of experiences where you can go, okay, yeah, that's how some people think and operate. And if I think back on my time in business, there's plenty of situations where a frank conversation would have been far better than the beating around the bush and the trying to make sure everything's okay when there's an issue. And it's like, let's be frank about the issue. Frank, respectful, but direct, and go, let's identify it, let's talk about it, and then let's find a way through it, as opposed to the, going around the mulberry bush. So that's probably the other piece. And I think both of those sort of go hand in hand in a way.
So James, very, very wise advice then about the power of just listening in some circumstances, but in others being willing to give, and the power, in fact, of frank conversations. So the other dimension I wanted to explore today, I understand that at an early age you had some involvement in your family's business, in a very different type of business. So it's quick. Run through a little bit about the family business and what you learned from that experience.
Well, I did grow up in our family business, Martin, and Dad and Mum started that business off. Dad started it off on the back of a fishing boat in the 1970s, and fished his way up the Queensland coast, and built a business which then grew into a trading and a marketing business for a group of fishermen, prawn fishermen primarily, and then that expanded into other lines. Dad and Mum have worked in that business basically their whole lives. Mum built a providoring business up alongside that, and has also then, since the formation of it's called Independent Seafood Producers, since the formation of ISP has been part of it as well. She runs all of the finance and accounts today, has done for many years. So Mum and Dad sort of built that business off. My brother Sean now runs that business day to day, and our whole family is it's part of our lives. So as a kid, a lot of afternoons after school, I'd go back to the office before everybody went home and did my homework in the office. And most school holidays, I worked in the business. Yeah. And I think probably fair to say I did most jobs in my time there. It was cleaning the floor in the factory, or serving customers in the retail shop, or peeling prawns. I think one day I was probably 10 or 11. I think I packed out about a ton of cuttlefish heads. That was fun. And, learnt the bookkeeping and all that sort of stuff. So I think just the osmosis of being in that environment was, really formative, and something I carry with me today.
So, James, not many actuaries with that much experience in the seafood business. So, again, what's one thing you learned growing up in that environment that has been helpful in your business world?
I think the ability to straddle and be resourceful.
Yeah.
If I look at what Mum and Dad did starting the business off, and it was built from nothing essentially. You can't just sit and preside and direct everyone around. When you need to get on the floor, you get on the floor. The sort of straddling of the business side and the market and the business development and the operations and the logistics and all the rest of it. It's a complex business. It's wholesale, it's export, it's distribution, it's retail. it was again, at the time probably didn't process it this way, but looking back, the notion of a portfolio and how a portfolio works. There's it's a portfolio of different lines of business, and they operate independently and together. And the way the business is structured and works and is managed is a portfolio. And I mean, that's a key principle in risk management, isn't it? So, looking back in hindsight, it was a really formative experience in risk management. Having the retail shop there with loyal customers who come back week after week, is really important to the business, as is when there's lobsters that come in for export, and it all adds up together. So, I think I don't think it was one thing in particular. I think the osmosis of obviously being a young person in that environment, and hearing the conversations that would happen in the office and on the factory floor, and again, at the time, was I processing at this level? Of course not. But the totality of that, and certainly looking back on it, was very formative and gave me reference points and principles that I still think about and draw upon today.
Yeah, I'm sure that some of those principles at such a formative age would be so well embedded that it would be really helpful for your many business clients to hear that well-grounded advice. So, James, it's been a pleasure chatting. What's thinking about those experiences, diverse experiences? What's one piece of guidance or advice you have for the viewers and listeners today?
Just go and get involved in something. Get out of your day to day. Go do something interesting. Who knows? You might love it. I've just started playing bridge, and I love it. Maybe I'll start knitting too while I'm playing bridge. No, I'm joking. No, just go do something. Who knows who you might meet, what you might learn. You probably make some great new friends. Probably meet people who you haven't met before, and just enjoy it. And what will come from that, again, certainly in my experience, what's come from that is not only great pleasure, but things that you can then draw back into your life, whether it be business or personal.
Yeah. All right, go and do it. Find something, and please enjoy it. Great chatting today, James. And I'm sure the viewers, listeners, will learn a great deal from your many experiences. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
So there you have it, real life stories and practical tips from a leader using their actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to get in touch, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your network. You'll find details from today's interview in the show notes below and on our website www.guardianactuarial.com.au. Until next time.